One of the most meaningful psychological changes many emotionally healthy men experience, after the age of 60, is the gradual shift from depending on other people's, approval, to building a lasting sense of self-respect from within. This transformation rarely happens overnight. Instead, it grows from decades of life experience, personal victories, disappointments, changing priorities, and countless moments of reflection. Earlier in life, many people naturally look outside themselves for signs that they are successful or valuable. A promotion at work, praise from a spouse, compliments from friends, recognition from the community, or admiration for financial success can all feel rewarding. There is nothing inherently wrong with enjoying appreciation, because positive feedback is a normal part of healthy relationships. The problem begins when a person's emotional well-being depends almost entirely on receiving that approval. When self-worth rises and falls with every compliment or criticism, life can become emotionally exhausting. Many men spend years trying to meet expectations that constantly change, believing they must always prove themselves to employers, family members, friends, or even strangers. By the time they reach their 60s, however, emotionally healthy men often begin asking a very different question. Instead of wondering, "Do people approve of me?" they start asking, "Am I living in a way that reflects my values?" That subtle change creates a profound difference in how they experience everyday life. Rather than chasing praise, they focus on qualities such as honesty, responsibility, kindness, patience, dependability, and integrity. These qualities remain meaningful whether someone notices them or not. Healthy aging often encourages this shift, because later life naturally changes many of the external roles that once defined identity. Retirement may reduce professional recognition. Adult children become independent. Social circles change. Instead of seeing these changes as losses, emotionally mature men often recognize them as opportunities to build confidence that no longer depends on titles or applause. Consider a man who spent decades saying yes to every request because he feared disappointing others. He worked extra hours even when exhausted, avoided expressing his opinions to prevent conflict, and constantly worried about what people thought of him. Over time, he realized that no amount of approval ever brought lasting peace, because every compliment was temporary, and every criticism felt deeply personal. As he became more emotionally aware, he learned to pause before making decisions and ask himself whether he was acting from genuine conviction or simply trying to earn acceptance. Sometimes he politely declined invitations when he needed rest. Sometimes he respectfully disagreed during family discussions instead of pretending to agree with everyone. At first, these choices felt uncomfortable because they challenged lifelong habits. But eventually, they brought a quiet confidence that came from being authentic rather than constantly performing for approval. Interestingly, many of his relationships became stronger instead of weaker because people experienced a more genuine version of him. Psychology has long recognized the difference between external validation and internal self-worth. Individuals with a strong internal sense of identity generally handle praise with gratitude, but without becoming dependent on it, and they respond to criticism by considering whether it contains useful information instead of automatically seeing it as a personal attack. This emotional stability makes communication healthier because conversations become less defensive and more respectful. Rather than trying to win approval, emotionally healthy men become better listeners, more thoughtful decision-makers, and calmer problem solvers. They understand that disagreement does not automatically mean rejection, and that setting respectful boundaries is not selfish, but necessary for emotional well-being. They no longer believe they must please everyone to deserve love or respect. Instead, they recognize that genuine relationships are built on mutual honesty, not constant people-pleasing. A practical habit that supports this mindset is taking a moment before important decisions to ask, "Am I choosing this because it reflects my values, or because I hope someone else will approve?" That simple question helps separate authentic choices from approval-seeking behavior. Over time, repeating this practice strengthens emotional independence and encourages decisions based on character rather than fear. Emotionally healthy senior men do not stop appreciating encouragement or kind words, but they stop allowing those things to determine their worth. Their confidence comes from knowing they have lived with integrity, treated others with respect, accepted responsibility for their actions, and remained true to the principles that matter most. That quiet self-respect becomes far more dependable than public praise, allowing them to enjoy relationships with greater freedom, authenticity, and emotional peace. Many emotionally healthy men discover after the age of 60 that the strongest relationships are not built on constantly proving their worth, but on being genuinely themselves. Earlier in life, it is common for people to believe they must always perform in order to be accepted. They may feel pressure to be the successful provider, the dependable problem solver, the funniest person in the room, or the one who never shows uncertainty. While these efforts often come from good intentions, they can gradually create an exhausting cycle where love, respect, or friendship begins to feel conditional. Instead of simply enjoying relationships, a person starts wondering, am I doing enough to earn appreciation? Emotionally healthy senior men often recognize that this mindset creates unnecessary stress because no one can maintain a perfect image forever. Life naturally includes moments of success and disappointment, confidence and doubt, strength and vulnerability. As emotional maturity grows, they begin replacing the desire to impress people with the desire to connect honestly. They realize that meaningful relationships are strengthened by authenticity, not perfection. This shift changes the way they communicate with spouses, family members, friends, neighbors, and even new acquaintances. Rather than feeling obligated to have the perfect answer for every situation, they become comfortable saying, "I'm still learning," or "I'm not sure, but I'd like to understand." Far from making them appear weak, this honesty often increases trust, because people generally feel more comfortable around someone who is genuine than someone who always seems to be performing. Communication research consistently suggests that authenticity encourages stronger, emotional bonds because it reduces defensiveness and creates psychological safety, allowing conversations to become more open and respectful. Consider the example of a grandfather who spent most of his career in a leadership position, where everyone expected him to solve problems quickly. For years, he carried that same role into family life, believing he always needed to provide advice or fix every challenge his children and grandchildren faced. As he grew older, however, he noticed that his family often needed his presence more than his solutions. Instead of immediately offering answers, he began listening with patience, asking thoughtful questions, and acknowledging that some problems simply required understanding rather than immediate action. His grandchildren felt more comfortable sharing their struggles because they no longer worried about being judged or corrected. His adult children appreciated having conversations instead of lectures. Without trying to impress anyone, he became a more trusted and respected figure in the family, simply because he was emotionally available. This principle extends to friendships as well. Many senior men eventually stop comparing careers, financial achievements, or accomplishments and begin valuing conversations that are sincere and meaningful. Instead of trying to appear endlessly successful, they are willing to admit mistakes, share lessons learned, laugh at themselves, and appreciate the experiences of others. This creates friendships based on mutual respect, rather than silent competition. They also become less concerned about whether every person likes them, because they understand that healthy relationships cannot be forced through constant performance. If someone values them only when they meet unrealistic expectations, that relationship may never provide genuine emotional security. Emotionally healthy men accept that authentic relationships require honesty, reasonable boundaries, and mutual respect instead of endless approval seeking. One practical communication habit that supports this mindset is entering conversations with curiosity instead of self-promotion. Rather than thinking about how to sound impressive, focus on understanding the other person's perspective, asking thoughtful questions, and responding sincerely. People often remember how someone made them feel far more than they remember impressive stories or achievements. Another valuable practice is allowing yourself to express appropriate vulnerability. Admitting uncertainty, acknowledging personal growth, or sharing a lesson learned from experience often creates stronger human connections than pretending to have everything figured out. Emotional maturity does not mean revealing every private thought or abandoning confidence. It means feeling secure enough to stop hiding behind an image that was designed only to earn approval. By letting go of the need to constantly perform, emotionally healthy senior men free themselves to enjoy relationships with greater peace, deeper trust, and more genuine connection. They discover that lasting respect comes not from appearing perfect, but from being consistent, honest, compassionate, and comfortable with who they truly are, and that realization becomes one of the most liberating psychological changes of later life. One of the clearest signs of emotional maturity after the age of 60 is learning that it is impossible to make everyone happy, and emotionally healthy men gradually become comfortable with that reality without becoming cold, defensive, or indifferent. This is not about ignoring other people's feelings or refusing to compromise. Rather, it is about understanding the important psychological difference between being kind and being subtle responsible for everyone else's emotional reactions. Earlier in life, many people develop the habit of avoiding disappointment at all costs. They may agree to plans they do not enjoy, remain silent when they have a different opinion, or sacrifice their own needs simply to avoid criticism or conflict. While these choices can create temporary peace, they often lead to long-term frustration, emotional exhaustion, and even resentment because a person begins living according to other people's expectations instead of their own values. After decades of life experience, emotionally healthy senior men often realize that disagreement is a natural part of every meaningful relationship. Friends may have different opinions, adult children may make choices they would not make themselves, neighbors may misunderstand a decision, and family members may occasionally feel disappointed. Instead of seeing these moments as personal failures, emotionally mature individuals recognize them as normal experiences that every healthy relationship eventually encounters. Imagine a retired man who has always attended every family gathering because he feared someone might think he did not care. As he grows older, he begins paying closer attention to his physical and emotional well-being. One weekend, after several busy weeks, he decides to spend a quiet afternoon at home instead of attending another social event. Some relatives may initially express disappointment or ask why he is not coming, and years earlier, he might have changed his plans immediately just to avoid making anyone unhappy. Now, however, he kindly explains that he needs time to rest and recharge, assuring his family that his decision has nothing to do with a lack of love or appreciation. He speaks respectfully, listens to their feelings, but does not abandon his own healthy boundary simply to remove every trace of discomfort. Over time, his family comes to understand that his decisions are thoughtful rather than selfish, and they face at ease. Begin respecting his honesty because it is consistent and communicated with kindness. Psychology recognizes this ability as an important part of emotional regulation and healthy boundary setting. Emotionally resilient people understand that they are responsible for their behavior, their words, and the respect they show others, but they are not responsible for controlling every emotion another person experiences. This distinction reduces unnecessary guilt and creates healthier relationships because interactions become based on honesty instead of fear. It also changes the way emotionally healthy men respond to criticism. Instead of reacting immediately with anger or defensiveness, they pause and ask themselves whether the feedback contains something useful. If it does, they are willing to learn and make adjustments. If the criticism is unfair or based on misunderstanding, they can acknowledge the other person's perspective without allowing it to define their self-worth. This balanced approach reflects confidence rather than stubbornness. Communication also becomes calmer and more constructive because emotionally healthy men replace emotional reactions with thoughtful responses. They might say, "I understand why you see it that way," or "I appreciate your concern, but this decision feels right for me," instead of arguing endlessly to gain approval. Such responses demonstrate both empathy and self-respect. Another practical strategy is regularly asking yourself whether you are saying yes because you genuinely want to help, or because you are afraid someone might be disappointed if you decline. This simple question encourages more intentional decisions and prevents people-pleasing from becoming an automatic habit. Healthy aging often brings the wisdom to recognize that lasting relationships do not require constant agreement. In fact, respectful disagreement can strengthen trust because it allows each person to be authentic without fear of rejection. Emotionally healthy senior men also learn that temporary disappointment is very different from permanent rejection. Someone may disagree with a decision today and still love and respect you tomorrow. Understanding this reduces anxiety and encourages more honest communication. By accepting that they cannot control every opinion or satisfy every expectation, they gain the emotional freedom to live according to their values while continuing to treat others with compassion, fairness, and respect. That balance between kindness and personal integrity is one of the most powerful reasons emotionally healthy men stop chasing approval after 60, because they finally understand that genuine peace comes from living honestly, not from trying to keep everyone else constantly pleased. As emotionally healthy men move beyond the age of 60, many experience a powerful psychological shift that changes the way they define success. Instead of investing most of their energy in protecting their reputation or gaining recognition from others, they begin focusing on living a life filled with purpose and personal meaning. During earlier stages of adulthood, it is understandable that reputation often carries significant weight. Careers, professional achievements, financial stability, social status, and the opinions of others can strongly influence how people see themselves. Many men spend decades working hard to provide for their families, earn respect from colleagues, or build a positive image within their communities. These goals are not unhealthy in themselves. Problems arise when reputation becomes the primary source of identity. External recognition is unpredictable because it depends on factors that are often outside a person's control. A respected career eventually comes to an end through retirement. Community roles change. Children grow into independent adults with their own responsibilities. Friends relocate, social circles evolve, and public recognition naturally becomes less frequent. For someone whose self-worth depends entirely on being noticed, these life transitions can create feelings of emptiness or uncertainty. Emotionally healthy senior men, however, often approach this season of life from a different psychological perspective. Rather than asking, "Do people still admire what I have accomplished?" they begin asking, "How can I continue to live in a way that reflects what truly matters to me?" This change transforms daily life because purpose does not disappear when titles or the achievements fade. Instead, purpose becomes rooted in values, contribution, growth, and meaningful relationships. A retired teacher may no longer stand in front of a classroom every day, but he still finds purpose by mentoring young people, helping grandchildren with homework, or volunteering in literacy programs. A former business owner may no longer manage employees, yet he discovers fulfillment by sharing wisdom with aspiring entrepreneurs or supporting local charities. A man who once measured success by promotions may now find deep satisfaction in caring for his spouse, maintaining close friendships, learning new skills, tending a garden, or simply being emotionally present for his family. These contributions may never receive public applause, but they create a lasting sense of meaning because they reflect personal values rather than public recognition. Research in the field of healthy aging consistently suggests that maintaining a sense of purpose contributes to emotional well-being, resilience, and overall life satisfaction. People who engage in meaningful activities often report greater fulfillment because their motivation comes from within instead of depending on external praise. This internal motivation is especially valuable later in life because it remains stable even when circumstances change. Consider the example of a retired engineer who once received regular awards and professional recognition throughout his career. After retirement, those public accomplishments naturally became less frequent, and at first, he wondered whether his most meaningful years were behind him. Instead of dwelling on what he had lost, he began volunteering at a local community center, where he taught practical problem-solving and basic engineering concepts to teenagers interested in science. The work brought no salary, no impressive title, and very little public attention, yet it gave Khan its profound sense of purpose because he could see the positive impact he was making in the lives of others. His satisfaction came not from being admired, but from knowing his knowledge continued to benefit people. This shift also changes relationships in meaningful ways. Emotionally healthy men become less concerned about receiving credit for every good deed, and more interested in quietly contributing wherever they can. They may help a neighbor with a home repair, support a friend during a difficult season, or spend quality time with family without expecting constant appreciation in return. Gratitude is welcomed, but it is no longer the reason they choose to be generous. Their actions are guided by character rather than recognition. A practical way to develop this mindset is to regularly ask yourself, what activities leave me feeling fulfilled even if nobody notices them? Mine. The answers often reveal the difference between living for reputation and living for purpose. Whether it is volunteering, learning a musical instrument, reading to grandchildren, exercising for better health, participating in community projects, or simply being a dependable friend, these meaningful activities strengthen emotional well-being because they are connected to personal values instead of public approval. Over time, emotionally healthy senior men realize that the most satisfying legacy is not how many people applauded them, but how faithfully they lived according to their principles and how positively they influenced the lives of those around them. By investing their energy in purpose rather than reputation, they experience greater peace, stronger emotional resilience, and a deeper sense of fulfillment that continues to grow long after external recognition has faded. One of the most rewarding discoveries emotionally healthy men often make after the age of 60 is that becoming less dependent on other people's approval does not weaken relationships. It actually makes them stronger, more peaceful, and more genuine. At first glance, some people assume that if a person stops seeking approval, they must also become emotionally distant or stop caring about others. In reality, the opposite is often true. Emotional independence is not about withdrawing from family, friendships, or romantic relationships. It is about developing enough inner confidence that love and connection are based on mutual respect rather than a constant need for reassurance. Earlier in life, many people unknowingly place heavy emotional expectations on those closest to them. They may expect frequent praise, regular validation, or continuous confirmation that they are appreciated. While everyone enjoys feeling valued, depending on constant reassurance can create pressure within relationships. Every disagreement may feel like rejection, every delayed phone call may seem personal, or every difference of opinion may be interpreted as a sign that the relationship is weakening. Emotionally healthy senior men gradually learn that healthy relationships naturally include busy seasons, misunderstandings, changing priorities, and occasional disagreements, without these experiences threatening the foundation of love and respect. This understanding allows them to respond with patience instead of anxiety. Imagine a father in his late 60s whose adult children now have careers, families, and responsibilities of their own. Years earlier, if several weeks passed without a phone call, he might have immediately concluded that they no longer cared about him or appreciated everything he had done for them. Those assumptions could easily lead to hurt feelings, resentment, or emotionally charged conversations. As emotional maturity develops, however, he begins viewing the situation through a broader perspective. He remembers how demanding life can become, and understands that periods of silence often reflect busy schedules rather than a lack of love. Instead of waiting with growing disappointment, he reaches out warmly, asks how everyone is doing, and enjoys the time they spend together without keeping an emotional scorecard of who called first or who expressed gratitude most often. This simple shift creates a more relaxed and enjoyable family relationship because interactions are guided by genuine affection instead of unmet expectations. Psychology describes this ability as emotional regulation, the capacity to manage 1 to 7 for 4 card. Psychology describes this ability without immediately relying on other people to restore a sense of security. Individuals with strong emotional regulation tend to communicate more calmly, recover more quickly from disappointment, and approach conflicts with greater empathy and balance. Rather than reacting impulsively to every emotional trigger, they pause, consider different explanations, and choose thoughtful responses. This skill is especially valuable in later life because relationships often change as families grow, retirement alters routines, and social circles evolve. Emotionally healthy men recognize that these transitions are a normal part of life, rather than evidence that they have become less important. This mindset also improves communication in everyday situations. Instead of using guilt, silent disappointment, or indirect comments to seek reassurance, they express their feelings honestly and respectfully. They might say, "I always enjoy hearing from you," rather than implying that someone has failed them. This approach encourages closeness because it communicates appreciation without creating pressure or obligation. Another practical habit is learning to give affection freely instead of treating kindness as something that should always be immediately returned in equal measure. A thoughtful message, a sincere compliment, or an act of generosity becomes an expression of personal character rather than a hidden request for recognition. People often feel more comfortable and emotionally safe around someone whose kindness is genuine and not tied to expectations of repayment. Emotionally healthy senior men also become better listeners because they are no longer focused on seeking validation during every conversation. They become curious about other people's experiences, celebrate the successes of loved ones without comparison, and support friends without needing to be the center of attention. As a result, relationships grow deeper because they are based on trust, emotional security, and mutual understanding instead of approval seeking. Ultimately, these men stop chasing approval not because they have stopped caring about people, but because they have learned that their worth does not depend on constant reassurance. Their confidence comes from knowing who they are, living according to their values, and treating others with kindness and respect. That inner stability allows them to love more freely, communicate more honestly, handle disappointment with greater resilience, and enjoy relationships without the burden of constantly wondering whether they have done enough to earn someone else's approval. In many ways, this emotional independence becomes one of the greatest gifts of healthy aging, creating stronger connections, greater peace of mind, and a deeper appreciation for the relationships that truly matter.